All right, these next sections of Jesus' sayings are usually the most quoted by preachers concerned with your morality and conformity. They actually sound a lot like the writings of Paul than the Beatitudes we just read. So how do they actually fit into this Sermon on the Mount section? That's this big social critique. Now, normally I'd like to quote great theologians, philosophers, mystics, writers at this point to kind of shed light on that question, but today I will quote the great role-playing video game from 1997 called Final Fantasy Tactics to help us understand the Sermon on the Mount. Yes, a character in that game says something very profound that's kind of got some traction today. It says, if the penalty for a crime is a fine, then that law only exists for the lower class. Dang, keep that in mind for a minute. Hold on to that. Now, Jesus has taken up John's critique of the powers that be, namely Herod, saying, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is here. Stop using your power to oppress people. This is a political statement, not a theological one. Think about the concept of kingdom to a king. This is my realm that benefits me, and things are as I want them because I am the king. And John said a different kingdom was about to emerge. He might as well have declared war, because that is when two kingdoms oppose one another. That's called a war, right? Which is exactly what happened. And John was arrested. Then Jesus takes up that critique. His first message after this critique is the Sermon on the Mount, which illustrates what a society should or could look like if it followed the law of a different kingdom, namely God's. So insert this next section about anger and murder, and all of a sudden it sounds very individualistic and moralistic, right? Jesus said, well, you've heard it said, do not murder, which is a quote from Moses in the Ten Commandments. So they have heard it said, right? And by someone that they respect. And then Jesus says, but I tell you, don't be angry with someone or you are liable for judgment. Christians shouldn't experience anger because it makes God angry. Huh? How's that work, right? If that anger translates into an insult, then you're liable for a greater judgment. And if you call someone a fool, you're in danger of, quote, hellfire, which must be said with a Southern Baptist drawl. For some reason, you just can't say it another way. So I dove into the Greek on this one to nerd out a little bit. And it says, if you're angry with your brother, you are liable to judgment. The actual Greek thing is your anger is evidence against you in court. Okay, hold on to that. Because the next section says if you call your brother an idiot, that is evidence against you in the Sanhedrin, which is the high courts of the land. And if you call your brother a moros, or a moron, that is evidence against you in the fires of Gehenna. Holy smokes. So you can see that there's like this increase in severity of courts and punishments. Are these God's courts and judgments? No. These are the human courts of the day that were bent in favor to those with money and power. First the local courts, then the higher courts, the Sanhedrin, and finally the physical dump heap called Gehenna that they would toss your body when they're done with you. Because that's what they do with criminals and dead bodies. They throw it in the dump heap called Gehenna that's on fire. Literally on fire. That's where they burn their trash and dead animals and peoples and things. So if you stir up trouble with those in power, like John did, you will face the courts and you will go to jail. So Jesus is actually giving the poor a non-violent tactic to dodge the court systems. If you remember that your brother has something against you, go reconcile or change his mind about you, and do so by making friends with your legal adversary. This is like directly out of the Greek, which literally means to have a peaceable spirit about you. Because if you seek retribution, it will turn on you in a system of power that favors retribution against those without influence. This is how God's justice works. So to make this passage about God's issuing out punishments of condemnation for those who misbehave, it's actually the opposite of its intention. God's ways are not like ours. They are much, much higher. They are not glorified versions of our own violence, but restorative justice that seeks peace. So this passage is not about what God's going to do to you if you misbehave. This is about what the court systems are going to do to you. So remain at peace with your brothers, your home fellows because they could drag you to court and bad things are going to happen. So it's actually a non-violent tactic on how to skip the courts. Interesting.